Whispers turned to screams in the dim-lit villages of medieval England, where one iron device clamped shut the voices of the defiant, forever changing how society controlled its women. Chapter 1. The Origins of the Brank's Bridle. A tool born from fear. Let's dive right into the heart of this chilling invention. The Brank's Bridle, also known as the scold's bridle, emerged in the 16th century, but its roots stretch back even further into the turbulent social landscape of medieval England. Picture a time when communities were tightly knit. Gossip spread like wildfire, and any woman deemed too outspoken, whether nagging her husband or arguing in the marketplace, faced public shaming. This device wasn't just a punishment, it was a symbol of control, designed to literally silence those who disrupted the fragile order of patriarchal society. Historians trace its earliest mentions to Scotland around 1567, but by the 1600s it had become a staple in English towns, often commissioned by local authorities or even churches to enforce moral codes. At its core, the brank was a metal cage that fit over the head, with a flat iron bit extending into the mouth to press down on the tongue. Some versions featured spikes or a gag to cause pain if the wearer tried to speak, ensuring that every word attempted brought agony. Crafted by blacksmiths from iron or sometimes brass, these bridles varied in design, simple loops for the head in basic models, or more elaborate ones with bells to add to the humiliation, jingling as the victim was paraded through streets. Why did it gain popularity? In an era plagued by religious strife, economic hardship, and rigid gender roles, men in power feared women's voices as threats to stability. Laws like those against scolding or common barators, troublesome arguers, provided legal backing, turning personal disputes into public spectacles. Take, for example, the case in early records from Edinburgh, where a woman accused of slandering a neighbour was fitted with the bridle and led around the town square. It wasn't just about pain. It was psychological warfare, breaking spirits through embarrassment. Practical tip for understanding this. If you're researching history, start with primary sources like parish records or old court documents. They reveal how everyday folk, not just nobles, fell victim. Modern replicas in museums, like those at the Tower of London, show the crude engineering. Lightweight enough to wear for hours, but heavy on symbolism. As we wrap this up, it's clear the brank wasn't invented in a vacuum. It reflected deeper fears of unrest. This sets the stage for how it was actually deployed in daily life, where the line between justice and cruelty blurred even further. Chapter 2. The Ritual of Punishment. Parading the Silenced. The brank's bridle wasn't just a tool. It was the centerpiece of a grim public spectacle meant to silence and shame. In medieval England, towns turned punishment into theatre, where the community gathered to witness a woman's voice being locked away. The process began with a formal accusation, often from a disgruntled neighbour or a husband claiming his wife's words had crossed a line. Once guilt was decided, usually by a local magistrate or church official, the sentence was swift. The accused was fitted with the iron cage, its cold metal biting into her scalp, the bit pressing against her tongue to stifle any protest. Then came the parade, a humiliating march through streets lined with onlookers, some jeering, others whispering in fear. These processions followed a deliberate route, past the market, the church, the tavern, ensuring maximum visibility. In Chester, records from 1620 describe a woman named Margaret Dodd, accused of berating a shopkeeper, being led through the town with a brank adorned with a small bell that jingled with every step, amplifying her disgrace. The device wasn't always uniform. Some towns added flourishes like painted symbols or chains, turning the wearer into a walking warning. The punishment wasn't just about silencing speech. It was about erasing defiance from public view. Crowds didn't always cheer. Some accounts note uneasy silence, as if onlookers sensed the injustice beneath the spectacle. The ritual extended beyond the parade. In some cases, women were tethered to a pillory or a market cross, left for hours with the brank locked in place, exposed to weather and ridicule. In York, a 1633 case tells of a woman left at the town gate, her muffled attempts at speech-drawing laughter from passers-by. The psychological toll was immense. Survivors rarely spoke out again, their spirit broken by the ordeal. This wasn't random cruelty. It was a calculated act to reinforce who held power and who didn't. The ritual's impact lingered, embedding fear in every outspoken woman watching. It's a stark reminder of how public punishment shaped private lives, setting the scene for how the brank became a tool not just of shame, but of social control. Chapter 3. The Women Who Wore the Bridle. Voices Behind the Iron. The brank's bridle didn't discriminate by class or status. It clamped down on any woman whose words stirred trouble in the eyes of those in charge. These weren't just loudmouths or troublemakers. Many were ordinary women caught in the web of a society that feared their influence. Some were widows challenging unfair taxes, others young wives arguing with abusive husbands, or even midwives whose knowledge made men uneasy. The common thread? Their voices were deemed dangerous, and the brank was the tool to snuff them out. Consider Anne Bellon, a baker's wife in Newcastle around 1650. She was accused of railing against a local alderman who shortchanged her on grain. Dragged before a crowd, the brank was locked onto her head, its iron bit cutting her tongue as she tried to protest. Her crime wasn't just speaking out. It was challenging a man of power. Or take Joan Wells, a market vendor in Canterbury, who in 1612 was punished for gossiping about a neighbour's affair. The brank turned her sharp wit into a public lesson, her muffled cries echoing through the square. These women weren't criminals in the modern sense. Their offences were often rooted in survival, defiance, or simply speaking truth. The stories reveal a pattern. The brank targeted women who stepped outside their prescribed roles. In rural villages, where community ties were everything, a woman's sharp tongue could unravel alliances or expose secrets. In 1647, a Suffolk woman named Elizabeth Howe faced the bridle for accusing a local priest of drunkenness. Her punishment wasn't just about silencing her. It was about protecting the church's authority. These cases, pieced together from dusty court ledgers, show how the brank was wielded to keep women in line, their stories buried under the weight of shame. The legacy of these women lingers in the silence they were forced to endure. Their muffled voices set the stage for a broader question. How did entire communities justify such cruelty? And what did it reveal about the era's moral code? Chapter 4. The Moral Code Behind the Iron. Justifying Cruelty. The brank's bridle wasn't just a punishment device. It was a mirror reflecting the moral and social anxieties of medieval England, where silence was equated with virtue, especially for women. In a world governed by strict hierarchies, God above king, king above man, man above woman, any disruption was seen as a threat to divine order. The brank emerged as a tool to enforce this order, justified by a mix of religious doctrine, community pressure, and a deep-seated fear of chaos. To understand why entire towns accepted this cruelty, we need to unravel the beliefs that made such a device not just tolerable, but necessary in the eyes of those who wielded it. In the 1600s, England was a patchwork of villages where survival hinged on cooperation and conformity. The church, often the heart of a community, preached that women's speech, if unchecked, could lead to sin. Gossip was a gateway to slander, and slander to rebellion. Sermons frequently cited Proverbs 21:9, warning against a quarrelsome wife, framing outspoken women as threats to godly households. Local magistrates, often men of modest means themselves, leaned on these teachings to justify the brank. In 1639, a court in Durham sentenced a woman named Agnes Carter to the Bridle for disorderly speech after she publicly criticized a tax collector. The official record called her punishment a correction for the soul, revealing how moral righteousness cloaked raw control. Communities played their part too. Neighbors often reported each other, driven by personal grudges or fear of being seen as complicit in disorder. In a 1625 case from Lincoln, a woman named Marjorie Black was accused by her own sister-in-law of spreading rumors about a local merchant's debts. Marjorie's march through the town, her brank jingling with every step, wasn't just punishment. It was a warning to others. Speak out, and you'll be next. The crowd's role was crucial. Their jeers or silent stares reinforced the message that stepping out of line invited collective judgment. Some towns even kept a brank on display in the market square, a constant reminder of the cost of defiance. Yet, cracks in this moral facade existed. Not everyone cheered. In a 1642 diary entry from a Yorkshire merchant, he described watching a young woman, barely 20, endure the bridle for arguing with her drunken father. His words carry unease. Her cries were muffled, but her eyes spoke defiance still. Such accounts hint at quiet dissent, though rarely voiced publicly. The brank's use wasn't universally praised. Some clergy, like Puritan minister John Cotton, argued it was too cruel for Christian souls, though their objections rarely changed local practices. The device thrived because it served a purpose. It upheld a fragile social order where men's authority was paramount, and women's silence was non-negotiable. This moral code, steeped in fear and control, wasn't just about punishing individuals, it shaped entire communities. It sets the stage for the final chapter, where we'll explore how the brank's legacy lingered and how its echoes still whisper in modern times. Chapter 5. The Legacy of Silence. Echoes of the brank in modern times. The brank's bridle, with its iron grip and chilling purpose, faded from England's streets by the late 1700s, but its shadow stretches far beyond the cobblestones of medieval towns. As the Enlightenment brought new ideas about justice and human rights, the device fell out of favour, replaced by less visible forms of control. Yet, the brank story isn't just a relic of a brutal past. It's a lens through which we can see how societies, then and now, grapple with silencing voices that challenge the status quo. This final chapter unveils the full weight of the brank's legacy, tracing its decline, its lingering influence, and the lessons it holds for us today. By the mid-18th century, the brank's use dwindled as public opinion shifted. In 1760, a London magistrate's refusal to sentence a woman to the bridle, calling it barbarous, marked a turning point. Legal reforms, driven by Enlightenment thinkers like John Locke, emphasized individual rights over collective shame. Towns began favoring fines or imprisonment over public spectacles, and by 1800, most branks were gathering dust in church basements or displayed as curiosities. A 1775 record from Bristol notes a brank sold for scrap, its once feared presence reduced to mere metal. But the decline wasn't universal. Some rural areas clung to the practice into the early 19th century. In 1817, a Shropshire woman named Mary Holt was among the last recorded to endure the bridle for seditious talk against a local landlord, showing how deeply entrenched the need to control women's voices remained. The brank's physical presence may have vanished, but its spirit lingered in subtler forms. Victorian England replaced iron cages with social expectations. Etiquette manuals and moral guides urged women to be demure, their speech carefully measured. Women who spoke out, like early suffragists, faced ridicule or worse, echoing the brank's aim to silence. In 1869, when activist Lydia Becker was mocked in Parliament for demanding voting rights, the jeers carried the same intent as the crowds who watched brank processions centuries earlier. Even today, the legacy persists in less tangible ways. Online harassment targeting vocal women, from journalists to activists, mirrors the brank's goal of shaming defiance into silence. Studies like a 2020 Pew Research report show women, are disproportionately trolled for expressing opinions online, facing threats that aim to mute them just as the iron bit once did. The Brank also reveals a paradox. While it's silenced, it inadvertently preserved stories of resistance. Women like Ellen Parker, a 1663 case from York, who tore off her bridle during a parade and shouted defiance despite the pain, showed unbreakable spirit. Her act, recorded by a sympathetic scribe, became a whispered tale of courage. Museums today, like the one in Lichfield displaying a 17th century Brank, keep these stories alive, reminding us of both the cruelty and the resilience it provoked. The device's legacy forces us to ask, how do we still silence voices? And who decides what's too loud? From workplace dynamics to social media, the impulse to control speech endures, though the tools have changed. As we close this journey through the Brank's grim history, its lesson is clear. Silencing one voice ripples across generations, but so does the courage to speak. Let's keep this conversation going. Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more dives into history's untold tales.